So you have the invitation. If you've had this class with me before, where we've done this format, you have the invitation over there in the announcements. Click on it, and you come into the meeting, and you should be able to see. This you won't see unless you're in here. Got it? Here, you can always go to Google Chrome and go over to use the Google Chrome, and you can go to OBU and then come into Canvas, log into Canvas, and see that. Or well, you should go to you could go go there to Canvas and then go to the announcements and click on that so you can join the meeting. Got me? Okay. Now, I want to talk about a couple of things here before we go too much further. I want to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of what I'm after. And I'm down here in week 2, and I'm going to look at this first case follow-up. And I give you really extensive instructions in terms of what I want you to do, okay? Now, if you were to say, okay, what would be the key headings or parts of my response? Well, they're all right here. Follow me? So you've already got those laid out. Then if you have any references, you can do that. Now, I provided over here a couple of links. One is on how to add citations in a Word document, and I hope you're aware of it. If you're not, you can add citations using Word. And I'm going to pop this down for a sec, and I'm going to open up a Word document.
So each of these points right here
are Yes. And I want you, and if you can't, and if there's nothing there that you found, just something I couldn't find anything, or if you found something, yeah, that's part of the response. So that's how I want your response organized. Okay? Yeah. And then use the normal thing with cite. If you have a source that you cite, do the in-text citation and then put it into a bib so I see it at the end. Sometimes people put bibliographies in there. I'm okay. I'm just going to show you real quickly if you've never used this, and you click on the References tab, and you'll see insert a footnote, a bibliography, okay, or insert a citation. Now I'm going to click insert a citation. Now I'm going to add a new one, and I'll just show you how this thing works. It's so nice. Basically, it's just like a dialog box. And so all you have to do, for example, if you've got a document from a website, okay, you could just simply you could click show all bibliography fields, and then those that have a little red dot are those that you particularly need. So this will perfectly format electronic references. It'll do books. It'll do just about every type of reference that you're going to need. You just input the data, and then it formats it. So please do yourself a favor if you haven't used this and make use of it. Okay? And then once you've done this, it'll build a bibliography. Now I'll just show you real quickly a couple of the sample bibliographies that they have in Word. And you can see these are books. Yeah. And they're perfectly formatted for APA 6. If you're not using APA, you can come up here and you can choose Chicago 16th, which you never in your life want to see, MLA, Modern Language Association, or Turabian. A few people use Turabian, particularly for dissertations, that type of thing, but most people in the social and behavioral sciences use APA format. But if you say, man, I found this website and I'm not really sure, use this tool. It'll save you a lot of time. I do all the time, okay? And then all I have to do is just put in the data and it formats it beautifully, exactly how it ought to be formatted. Okay, well that was the one thing. That's one thing I wanted to show everybody to walk you through some of that. Now, let's go back up here for just a second. And this is the reference list. Okay. And I've got a link for you there as well. So if you were to say to me, okay, for case follow-up number 2, what do I want? Okay, I give you this little blurb at the start, okay, and be ready to discuss what you find, okay? Then follow-up 2 and 4 pages. With me so far? And then right down there, point by point by point. That's what I want, okay? If you do a paragraph or so for each one of these, if you have that, if you have that much of a response for it, then it'll be 2 to 4 pages. Okay? So use those as the headings. Those are the major sections of what should be your response. If, for example, you may, if you're working with if you have a company that's not publicly traded, well, tell me it's not publicly traded, so there's no symbol. Okay. What you say? Okay, well, what would be the most important thing that I'm wanting you to do? Well, this is really the part that gives this gives this course value. This course is about how do I use IT as a tool to accomplish company strategy. So there's a couple of things going on. One of them is what I call telescoping, where you're kind of looking at the whole operation of a company and you're saying, okay, how can I use IT to help us be sustainable? Then there are going to be those times when I say, okay, you're going to use a microscope and you're going to look at a particular operation or particular procedure to try and figure out, okay, how do I add to the company's strategic, help the company accomplish its strategy and thus its mission. Does that make sense? This is what I call a vocabulary course. You say, what do you mean? It's one where you're going to be exposed to a lot of terms, and many of these, for example, may or may not mean much to you until maybe later on in your career, okay? But we want to get you prepared for that so you can understand why, for example, Apple tries to use what they call a walled garden approach with all of their products and their applications. Well, they use a walled garden for a simple reason. It's a security issue and it's interoperability. If Apple will only play with Apple devices and Apple will only accept apps that come through their vetting process, then they're a walled garden. Now, Microsoft, Google, for example, Android, they try to be all things to all people. And Microsoft has security issues because they try to be all things to all people. They have a different approach or a different strategy. So that's the thing that I'm most eager for you to dive into is, okay, how does this case connect back to a particular theory or concept that's addressed in the course? Does that make sense? That is the most important piece of all of this. And there's 2 reasons. First of all is to grab the content, but more importantly is to train you as a manager or business leader or owner to be thinking in that way. To always be saying, okay, if I see a little bitty problem here, what is this? Is this a symptom of something much larger that I ought to be dealing with? Or if I look out in the environment I'm working in, are there opportunities for me to pursue? Okay, and what would those opportunities be? Does that make sense? So that's why I have you do the case follow. And there's going to be some times when you go, there's nothing there that's reported, etc. Just tell me that. I'm fine. Okay. I want to see if you'll just follow that along, and you're going to, some of these cases you'll find there's some, it's an ongoing issue. Privacy, for example, is an ongoing issue with Facebook. They will never, ever, it will never end, because privacy is going to keep changing, and it's going to be like a moving target for them and for everybody else that's concerned about it. Then I have a management decision problem. Let's look at this for a second, and I give you a choice. Okay. Now, you say, okay, well, where are the headings you're talking about? Well, here they are. See those? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Now you say, why so tightly constrained on this? Well, you're not writing papers. You're doing case follow-ups and you're doing a report. So I want you to get used to that. Boom, boom, boom. Style. So when you go out to work and your boss says, hey, take a look at this situation and give me a report back, you do it without trying to write them an academic paper, because that's not what we're doing. It's not what we're doing in here. And I do want you to cite your sources that you use, okay? And I want it to be organized, but you're not writing me papers, okay? Make sense? Okay. Hopefully that will be of some benefit to you. Now, each week, you're also going to have a quiz. And then if you look along, if you look right under that Loudon Chapter 2 quiz, you're going to see what I call some curated sources. And this is one that is a classic example. It's happening right now of trying to use information technology to work with the problem and understand it, where the people who are consuming the technology don't quite understand what they're really looking at. And folks like at the National Weather Service are very concerned. They're also, you have so many people out here with Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, particularly Instagram and Twitter, where you can take a picture of a tornado and say, tornado, blah, blah, blah. Or you can say, I'm in so-and-so city and street and we're flooded. Trying to make some sense of all this data so the public knows what to do. Now, this first one is out of the New York Times, and I always try to provide you something that's fairly recent. And I'm going to click over here, okay? And these are folks who are trying to decide, what do we do? Should we stay? Should we leave? And that's a tremendously difficult question for them based on forecasts, okay? When you watch these things, and they'll interview the person, the person in the bullseye, and some people go, I'm going to stay, it's not going to be that bad. And maybe they're right. Some people will say, well, I'm heading out of here because I don't want to take any chances. And most of the time, for me, what's crazy is that people will say, well, I'm going to stay here because I got my stuff here, and there will be looters. Well, if you get killed, your stuff's irrelevant. And trying to understand something like a hurricane that's a long standing kind of event is a difficult proposition. So you could see here, for example, if you're the National Weather Service and you're working with this concept of MIS, which they most certainly are, how do I get people the best information as quickly as possible so they know on the ground, do I run for the hills, do I drive or not? This morning, they had one of the people from the National Weather Service, and I can't remember what it was. I think they were talking about folks down in maybe Florida or Georgia. They were saying, don't try to drive 100 miles. Drive about 10 or 20 miles, because if you drive 100 miles, you're probably going to drive right back into it. And people often do that. So this is a good resource for you to take a look at when you're working with people. And this is literally life and death stuff. So I would really encourage you to take a look at that. Now, I have another curated source for you to take a look at, and I'm always trying to find you some real life examples. This is one I think that's very, very, very interesting, because most of the time folks look at these maps and they don't understand. Now, here's the typical thing that we see. This is, we'll see it on the Weather Channel or maybe on the local news, and they're covering this type of event, and you'll see this cone or this area, okay? Most people don't understand what that means. They truly don't. It looks like, okay, it's going to follow this path, okay? And here's how widespread the damage will be. And then as you start to look at it, what they're really talking about is what they call a cone of uncertainty. And what the forecasters are saying is, as this storm, if you look at it, as it comes inland, the uncertainty with which it will die out or it will just stop somewhere and dump rain for 4 days gets greater and greater and greater. So most folks don't understand that. And if you listen carefully, like especially with the National Weather Service folks, they call this a cone of uncertainty. Okay? I'll show you something that's very interesting. And again, this is one of these things with MIS. And they show you this, and they talk about some of the real world consequences, excuse me, of misunderstanding this. This is really no different than looking at a sales forecast. You build a sales forecast, and you forecast out, and you say, okay, we're going to do 1,000 units next year, we're going to have 1 million units. What you don't understand is, if you're not trained, is the fact that that forecast is subject to uncertainty. And the further it goes out, the more random it becomes. So here's one of these situations where we have airplanes, all kinds of technology to track this event. And yet the public, the people who are the end users, don't quite get this. And they show you this is what happened to the tornado where it actually went. Pardon me, the hurricane. It actually got a different track. And what they're showing you there with those multiple paths are within this zone of uncertainty are the multiple paths this thing can take. Okay? Now, if you've had STAT, which I would assume you probably have, and you've done some linear analysis and you did that, you probably learned about the thing called the line of best fit. And that is when we do a linear trend and then we try to do an analysis of it, we try to see how far actual data points are from that line of best fit, that forecast. And you look here and you can see any one of these possible routes it could carry, it could go, which means this is where it heads and this is where it will dump rain and all the other attendant problems that they have. You with me so far? This could be the same thing for your marketing analysis, you're trying to identify costs, the same principle. And the middle is just an estimate. So all they're doing there is using a linear trend analysis, albeit a very sophisticated one. And notice this, they say that when they give you this, it's going to be good for about 60 to 70% of the time. You have to flip that over and say about 40 to 30% of the time, this is wrong. So about a third of the time, it's not accurate. Okay? This is an MIS problem. Very, very, very typical when you're engaged in trying to do forecasting, especially if you're trying to do a forecast here and figure out where are we going to deploy all the resources to go in to help these people. You've got to make sure you're outside of the damage area. If you're not, you're in trouble too. And you can't do anybody any good if you're in the middle of the hurricane. So they make certain that you understand. And this is a very common example. And notice this, here we have a thermal that shows you rainfall concentrations, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe this is the wind, but you can see the intensity as it builds inside out. Now, if people don't get this, if the general public doesn't, or if you have employees that you show them income within a given area and they don't see or understand this, you've got a communication problem. So I hope as this hurricane is going, you'll take a look at it and see it as a giant case study, see what's going on with the people at the Weather Channel, the folks over at the National Weather Service, and then the people on the ground who are trying to deal with warning people, telling them, get out, get out, get out. Don't stay. When I lived up in St. Louis, I went through two big floods. The biggest was the flood of 1993. And I was amazed at the people that got flooded out, and 2 years later, there was an article in the Post-Dispatch, which is the newspaper there, and they were building in the same place where they got flooded out. I'm thinking, yeah, what are you thinking? Well, it was a 100-year flood. And what someone didn't tell them was that about 4 years later, they had a 500-year flood. Nature does as it will. Well, thought you would find that an interesting thing to take a look at. And again, one of those where I try to bring something from the real world into the issues that we fall into when we deal with MIS. And here are a couple of others where they talk about that this one for forecasters, the hurricane has been a handful. This is the struggle that meteorologists are having with people who are out there using social media, using their home weather kit to say, okay, well, I've got 6 inches here, and they're reporting these things, and then people see something and it goes viral, and then suddenly you have all this misinformation out there about what's actually happening on the ground. And that's a big problem that they're trying to deal with. And again, if you're a company and you have a Facebook page or you have a Twitter account and stuff hits out there and it goes viral and it's not accurate, you've got a big problem on your hand. Now, I have a couple of other things in here as well. One of these deals with Facebook and what's going on with their future. Privacy is going to be the #1 issue and topic for the next, I don't know how many years, probably 25 years, till you get things sorted out about who owns whose data, etc. There's a nice article there that talks about what they're doing there in Facebook. And then I have a very interesting resource there for you to take a look at that talks about how a tweet about chicken, and you can read it, it's ridiculously funny but not really if you're Popeyes, where it ended up in this shortage. There was some kind of a war on Twitter between Popeyes and some other companies that make chicken, and suddenly there's this run on Popeyes chicken, and they're out of chicken. They have a shortage. They got all these angry people that say, oh, I came to get chicken and they don't have any. And it's just a simple tweet that went viral. This is the kind of stuff that an MIS just makes people go crazy. But I think you'll find an interesting article because it does talk about how powerful these media are and how we want to try to use them. Over in chapter 2, if you got your book, I'd like to have it. So let's pop over to chapter 2. Now, I use a virtual book thing called Vital Source, so I don't have to cart the book around, or if you want to use a Kindle, I really encourage you, if you want to have a physical textbook, be my guest. If not, Kindle, which is Amazon's. I think there's an app now with Barnes & Noble. Then I use this application. It's called Vital Source that will let you have a digital copy of your textbook. You can rent it. I have to rent these because the publishers won't give them to us anymore. They quit doing it because they'd rather charge somebody $500 for a textbook when I can rent it for $120. You could rent it. I wasn't supposed to tell you that, but I did anyway. So let's look at part 1 there, okay? And we'll pop over to chapter 2, and they walk us through just some basics to kind of get us reminded about what we mean when we talk about business processes, okay? Now, when we think about management information systems, you almost have to look at it in the same way that you would with accounting or finance or operations, where you're following the flow of things. MIS is about the flow of information and how we collect that data, and then we distribute it, how we take it, we transform it from data to information to knowledge, and then eventually, hopefully, to some kind of business wisdom that we can use. And the authors here want to walk you through each of these ways that we use information technology in business processes. Okay? Now, as I said to you, this course is more on a strategic thinking level than it isn't just a simple of how I work through Excel or something like that. So it's a little bit different tack, and some of it will be challenging for us because maybe you've never had that experience to work at an enterprise level. Okay, and that's really what this text moves us to, or at least to have a good dialogue with the folks who are running IT. And you can walk through here, manufacturing and production, sales. And I could tell you, for example, just assembling products, robotics have changed all of that. And that's an application of information technology. If you were to go, for example, to Walgreens, to their warehouse, they have about 25 or 30 people that run their warehouse, their main warehouse. The rest of it's robots that go and pick and choose things and put them in bins and get them distributed. And we're seeing more and more of those types of applications, things like artificial intelligence, that are things that are used to help folks choose. Let's say if you go over, for example, and you're working with, you go to Amazon and you search for products, and you go back and keep using it. What you're doing is you're training Amazon's database to anticipate what you might want. So, and you see these areas like sales and marketing, identifying customers, making customers aware of the product. Again, all of these things have been changed by information technology. If you were to look at the firms, if you were to take the top 50 companies in the world today, the greatest portion of their wealth is from their information resources, patents, knowledge of processes, the information that their employees and the training their employees have. In the past, the value of the company was really assessed, and brand. If you're a marketing student, you know all about branding and understand how important that is to a company. In the past, it was physical stuff, but not anymore. And so as you walk through here, you can see finance and accounting. These are just business processes that have to occur, and they're augmented by information technologies. The authors do a nice job of helping us see this in terms of systematic terms by walking us through this order fulfillment process. Okay? And you can see all the things that have to happen for an order to be filled and to be met. And you can see sales, accounting, manufacturing, production, they're all working together. An order gets generated, then it gets submitted. You check the credit, you approve the credit, you generate an invoice, you assemble the thing, and you ship the product. One of the, I won't live to see it, but all of you will, if you live to be as old as I am, you will see this thing called these things called 3D printers will completely change retail, the manufacturing, and the retail business of selling people stuff. I think it will probably, goodness gracious, who knows? I think you'll probably have a home kit where you can manufacture things, buy and download it and have the extruder. It'll all be dumbed down to where you say, oh, I'd like a new set of dishes. Okay, you go out somewhere on the internet and you order a set of dishes, and you get the materials the next day, and you put them through that 3D printer and it produces it. That sounds pretty fantastic, but you know, if you would have told me I could get on here and Skype and talk to somebody anywhere in the world, any hour of the day, I said, no, okay, sounds like science fiction, but it probably will happen. So we're going to see tremendous, tremendous changes in that way. And just in that process of fulfilling an order. If something happens and it doesn't get fulfilled, then that becomes an issue you have to walk back through and work with it. But information technology walks through each of them. And if you look at this, this is important for you to see in terms of the process, okay, of the order fulfillment. But there's something far more important. It's this, to look at every step in that process and to ask yourself, where or how can I gain a competitive advantage? If I can approve credit for people, for customers, faster than my competitors, do I have an advantage? Yeah, for sure. If I can handle the generation of invoices quicker, of course. If I have an e-commerce site like Amazon, now when you and I go to Amazon and buy stuff from them, understand that's a sideshow for them. The real money they make is their Amazon Web Services, where they have the most sophisticated database in the entire world and the very best online analytical process in the entire world. Nobody is any better. That's why governments and large companies rent their system, just like you and I would buy some software or rent some software, because it's so good at what it does. And so if you're looking here and you have an online website, if you have an e-commerce site and you have a retail site where you're selling stuff to people who beam in from the web, that's one thing. If you have an e-commerce site, the chances are you're probably, when you talk about e-commerce, you're talking about back-end operations where you have your customer, your vendors, for example, or your valued customers who are interacting with you through this process. And the technology aids and abets you each point of the way. That makes sense? If you go out and take a look, for example, at automobiles, you can go out now, and most automobiles, the large sites, will have a little set of tools that you can use to figure out your car payment. And you can have a little slider and what your credit score is, and then here's the cost of the vehicle and the rate of interest you'll get at a certain credit score, and how long do you want the loan to be, and you have a projected payment. So any one of these offer a strategic advantage, potential for a strategic advantage, especially things like assembling and shipping. Everybody's used to getting stuff overnight. Okay? It's not that big of a deal to us anymore. I order something, hey, it's here. But when folks like FedEx and UPS first started fulfilling orders within a day for non-commercial customers, i.e. us, consumers, then we go, oh wow, I can get it in a day. I can get it in 2 days. I can get it in 3 days. You just choose, what do you want to pay? You want to pay the premium? Or you can pay like with Amazon. I think if you pay them $99 a year, they'll get it to you the next day. It's up to you. So they just walk you through a very simple thing of an order fulfillment process to show you how much is going on. Now, here's another one of these just kind of generic business processes where we're talking about making a payroll, doing payroll. There's a company called ADP. Have you ever heard of ADP? Okay, you know this? They do payroll processing. They were the first people to say, why should you pay all those clerks to sit in an office and make errors on people's payroll when we can automate the process and get you accurate payroll? And then we'll also handle, we not only do that, we'll handle the payrolls, we'll handle the payroll in terms of wire fund transfer from your bank to the banks of your employees. And people said, sign me up. If you're an employer and you make an error on payroll, you're in trouble. You got the employee mad at you. You probably have the state mad at you. And I know you have the federal, the IRS angry with you. So they're making a ton of money off of using IT to augment a very simple process. I remember the day and time when you worked for somebody and you went up to the office and you gave them your name and they gave you an envelope with your money in it. And the first time I got a wire transfer into my bank account, I thought, I'm dying and gone to heaven. Because if you've ever worked for an employer that bounced a check to you, ever had that experience? You don't want that one to happen, because then you deposit their check's no good, and you have a problem then. So again, we try to use the IT to augment these processes, and you can see, again, how they walk you through this employee database that begins the whole thing. If you took data admin with me, we talked a lot about this idea of a data warehouse and pulling data out of there, extracting it out to use it to make decisions by analyzing it and then visualizing it. When we start talking about enterprise computing and at an MIS level, we're talking about the linkage of the payroll system to your cash system, your accounting system, etc. So that's why I said this is as much a vocabulary course and a conceptual course as it is just kind of a doing thing. And that can kind of be off, that can put you off, I understand, okay? There's a lot of terms, a lot of terminology things here that can kind of throw you. And I'll be honest with you, every one of these things, like these last two that we saw, just these two simple processes are the battleground for so many companies trying to find a competitive advantage using information technology. And if I can't, if I have, for example, and I would grab it here for a minute. And I've got it all together here, okay? But I'm not so together here. I produce reports people can't understand. I produce reports that are inaccurate. It doesn't matter how good everything is behind it. This, what my end user sees, is a problem. So I'm always trying to make sure that I know who my end users are and that the product and what I give them is accurate, understandable, etc. Does that make sense? Now you said, well, every course I have, you talk about this. Yes. You know why? Because nobody out there does this. Few of them. The really good companies are good at doing this. Most of them, they're not quite sure what happened last week, much less what might happen 10 years from now. Let's erase this off a little bit, and I wanted to go ahead and walk us through just a couple of more things here, and then we'll get out. Here again is a transaction processing system at TPS. As you can see here, this one is feeding into, and you can see the flow, feeding into online reports and dashboards. The courses that we take you through in the BISS series walk you through okay, how would I portray this visually, and where would I get the data? You can see that process as it works itself through. And if something goes wrong there, especially with the MIS files, which would be your organizational files, or the processing system, you can see how these all flow together. Now, does this mean you have to understand this completely? No. But what you will need to know or understand is to be able to, what you will need to do is to be able to have a conversation with the people in computing about what's going on. And last week we had one of those classic failures. We had a server go down because of storm damage. We didn't have maybe the follow-up we should have had. And we came in here for class, or you came in for class, or you thought we'd have class and we didn't have it. My backup is to do what? Go back and record a class session and post it for you. But I had 40 students before all of you came in here last week who were going, okay, I can't get in. Who could have predicted? But we got the parts expedited and got them here and got them fixed. When this all works, it's nice, isn't it? When it doesn't work, it is a headache, a headache, a headache, a headache. And you can see, again, the authors are going to walk you through some stuff that's redundant for you, but here's a table, a set of data, the product code, description, the stuff that would be in a record in a database, and this would be a report on a query. And then they show you some performance data of actual versus planned. This is where, in this one column right here, of the actual versus planned, this is where you, as a manager, if you have accurate data that you can trust, now you can try to take corrective action to figure out what went wrong. Why are we off on one? Why are we above on the other? Even this right here, this column, is just begging to be put into something more visually that has a better visualization quality for us, because I'm just looking at a row of numbers. But if I use conditional formatting on this, for example, and went green to red, boom, you pick it up. Or I could add, like in Excel, I could add a spark line if I wanted to do that. I could put these into a graph, a chart. You got me? So it's thinking in terms of the system, and again, that's an issue of experience there, and a few people are going to ever master or understand all of the components of a system. I would say of the people that I've met or worked with in my life that really maybe had that type of a grasp would be Miss Turnage, who was here. If any of you remember her, who taught computer science. She had worked at Walmart in their World Center, and I guarantee you, they are systems people. And one of the things that was interesting, she told me, when there was a problem or something went bang in the night, you stayed till it was fixed. That might be an hour or 2 days, but you stayed till it was fixed, because their system is so complex and so large that a tiny error gets translated into all kinds of problems and issues. Now, again, you're going to see plenty of these through chapter 2. And as you see the flow here, stuff feeds from a data source or a data pool, and we translate it all into something that we can use. Okay? If the stuff here on the far right side, if that stuff is junk, then at the end you'll have junk. That's why everybody is trying to automate every input process they can to eliminate as much error as they can eliminate. I think it's interesting when my wife and I go shop or we go to a restaurant and I encounter someone who cannot make change. The bill is $11.67. How much should I get back? Well, my bill was $11, and I give you a $20 bill. How much do you get back? $8.33, I think. Is that right? And I've literally seen, this is true, I've seen people who will have a calculator. Now, which is better, that or your bill is $11.67, and you just put that card in that baby and it reads it? Which would you prefer if you owned that company? You want the employee or the card? ATM. You want the ATM, what? 0 errors. Plus, it comes out of their account much faster. If they give you cash, it's out of their account. But then you don't have to finagle around with cash and deal with quarters and all of that stuff. Anybody here ever been a cashier? You did the old style? Oh my goodness, if you ran out of dimes, call the bank, run, get dimes or quarters. Or people come in, they do 20s and they drain all of your 5s and 1s and 10s. They're going, I can't break that. Oh, oh my Lord, yes. Yep. Yep.
Credit cards were really, really big. When credit cards were still on the carbon copies.
Right, yeah.
Cash, bags, 2 bags to send to the bank.
My father was in the grocery business, and every other night he'd make the run to the bank. And I went with him one night, and he had $75,000 in cash he was carrying around in his car, and ran up. And you remember, had to make out the bank statement and all this stuff. And I told him, I said, you know, I hope you're carrying a piece, because if you're not, you're just begging to get robbed. Well, that's kind of hard to do today. But credit cards, boom, that's all taken care of. So you live in some ways in a golden age. Well, I have one final thing I wanted to share with you, and then I'm going to stop and see if I can answer some questions, or I'm going to let you head on out of here. If you take a look, and this is over in the textbook, you'll see this thing, and this is an example of a dashboard. You will hear people talk about it a lot. Okay, dashboard is a real simple concept. I have things called KPIs, key performance indicators. All right, and those are the things I need to monitor to see if we're doing okay. And the KPIs you have will be at different levels. In the old days, when I handled cash, or like over at Target, we stacked the 20s up to the wall, you really didn't know how things went for about a month. And if you're Target's upper echelon, you're breathing hard, hoping, oh, we did well. It looks like we emptied some of the shelves. Of course, you didn't know the deluge of returns that was coming your way, but you had some sense of how much you sold. You literally, until we had inventory SKUs, the little barcodes, you could not even know how much stuff you'd sold in a day. But you could see the dashboards here and the designs that they have with them to help you look and understand. Okay, yeah, we're doing okay. Our quantity and amounts, okay, here's return on investment, sales, a type of product, the retail outlet. So you're going to see this consistent theme where we talk about these business processes and how we use information technology to augment them. I'll just quickly tell you about one thing and then I will let you go. How many of you ever heard of blockchain? Heard it a little bit? Okay. Blockchain is a very simple technology. It's an algorithm. And when two parties engage in a transaction, the only parties who know the key to the algorithm is point A, point B. Now, if I can pay you through a blockchain type technology, PayPal uses some of this, but there are some others that are out there. And this is a little bit different than when you hear about like people using Bitcoin. I just cut the middleman out, the middle person, if you want to be politically correct. Why do you think Facebook wants to use Bitcoin or a cyber currency, a cryptocurrency? Simple. If they've got their own currency, they've just cut out some bank that charges them a fee to handle the transactions. So they want to eliminate that intermediary. It's pretty prevalent in Asia, not so prevalent here because we have so many layers of regulatory oversight. But that's one of those interesting technologies that are out there that will really change things. Imagine, for example, if you go over to eBay and you buy something and you pay the person directly. Some of you probably have an app where you do that now. You can borrow money from each other. Anybody use have one of those apps? Show people smiling and freaking around. Hey, I'll give you $100. Yeah, cool. I hope you can collect it. Well, any questions? Is it too late to go ahead and drop? But if you're crying big, they'll let you for a fee. Otherwise, I will be broadcasting Thursday. You're welcome to be in here in the classroom. If not, you need to beam in, you may. Thank you so much, folks. I know it's hot and uncomfortable in here, and I appreciate the time. Any questions? Okay.